Hey, my name's Eric Anderson, and welcome to the ADHD Go weekly live stream. Happy to have you here. Today, I want to talk about returning to what's quote unquote normal life. And I mean, it's pretty rudimentary. It's 2021. We all know there's no normal to return to, there's never been a normal. But it's still been giving me anxiety recently, and that's been added to by the fact that I see a lot of headlines saying, like, what if time to start the live stream. What if I'm sorry if I started too early, if anybody's just joining us now. Hello and welcome. So the topic of today is, again, going back to normal and understanding that there isn't really a normal. And I've been thinking about that um, because a lot of the the characteristics of the lockdown have actually really worked for me. I think feelings of social anxiety, agoraphobia, um, just generalized anxiety disorder, stress in new social situations, or any stressful situation that we might find ourselves in, it can start to creep into everyday situations. And things like agoraphobia and generalized anxiety disorder aren't necessarily a treatable condition until they start to cause you to avoid situations and miss opportunities, but they're uncomfortable in any degree. So I've been thinking about that in terms of returning from the quarantine or the lockdown and these stricter social distancing measures, where again, public gatherings and events and travel and just sitting in a crowded place, a crowded restaurant or movie theater, is going to become possible again. And a lot of those stressful, generalized anxiety kind of feelings were temporarily easy to manage. They were a bit easier to manage during the pandemic because we all sort of had a ready made excuse to avoid situations. And so a lot of those feelings that, of interpersonal relationships and also just being in public places, being observed, and sort of in any way vulnerable and in communication with other people and things can stir up a lot of feelings and can be very uncomfortable, very distracting. And so, this, for me, the pandemic kind of created a meditative space. It kind of, from this perspective, was a bit of a blessing. There was no pressure to leave the house. In fact, it was quite the opposite. We were actually encouraged to stay at home. And a lot of that felt good. And further, the mask kind of gave me permission not to smile, not to always be thinking about what kind of communication I'm making with others and what kind of communication they are in turn sending back to me. So, not having to deal with that, with things like face blindness and fumbled words or mumbling, all that was completely excusable. The best, and that kind of leads me to the best part of all this, was simply being able to tell people we were breaking down without needing to explain why. So, for a moment, society was kind of uncharacteristically caring and supportive. And that felt really good. I thought I could kind of get used to this. So now, to use a metaphor, that comfort blanket is being tugged away. And I don't want to sound like a whiny millennial here, but by using a comfort blanket metaphor or something like that. But I am a little reluctant to be joyful about, like, a return to normal, a return to what I see as a more um, as a more efficiency and productivity driven model, where the focus is on the product and what you can make and what you can brand and what you can monetize. And so getting your peak potential, your peak effort, toxic positivity gurus, this sort of thing. And that kind of went away. I mean, it will never go away. And of course, people are using this to, stay on their grind. Everybody's trying to make a business during the pandemic. I mean, I'm no different. I want to try to help people with stress about these exact things, though, that I also deal with, and develop techniques to manage. So the point is, the pandemic kind of suddenly made me acutely aware of a lot of long-standing anxieties that I was already experiencing in social situations. And this made me think, is it going to be difficult for me to return? Am I going to be some kind of changed by this experience in a way that's going to make it more difficult, less difficult? Am I going to totally want to change the way that I handle human interaction and relationships? And there's a lot of think pieces out there that kind of reinforced my this unspoken feeling I had at the time that this was something to be concerned about. But in reality, nothing has changed, or little has changed. I mean, as I said at the top, there's no normal to return to. We're still human. We still experience everything mostly through a lens that we choose. So whether we're going to come back from this changed, a little bit more sensitive to those things, a little less sensitive to those things, a little more eager for attachment, a little more reluctant to get attached or begin a relationship. That's always a personal choice. So, again, I love toxic positivity, so let's take it as an opportunity, right? Not to hustle, not to get on your grind, but in this moment, as I said, everything's the same, little has changed, but it is a different moment in one important way. And that's that this particular moment of transition of the post-pandemic period is a beginning that has some kind of gravitas, some kind of weight behind it, something that you'll be able to remember as a result of this period, that you can attach to this period and your idea of who you are as a person. Gives you an opportunity for a new path, for kind of a big change. So you'll be able to say, ever since the pandemic, I had an easier time making friends. Ever since the pandemic, I take time for my mental health. It's easier to be alone and to meditate. Ever since the pandemic, I am cooking more for myself and eating more healthy choices. Ever since the pandemic, I try to take care of my sleep and not be on social media all night. Or I take care of my sleep and I'm still on social media as much as I want. It doesn't matter. The choice is yours. You can just make a change that's going to bring you closer to your ideal future and your ideal future self in this moment. And you're going to be able to have that statement, that mantra, ever since the pandemic, and then some kind of positive behavior or healthy choice. So I'm a big fan of toxic positivity, so enjoy. I also like New Year's resolutions a lot, and whether or not they work out, when it comes to contentment, your attitude is everything, and that's something that you can control. So how can we make this time of transition sort of a positive re-entry experience? If you're not struggling with this, well, you're probably not watching, but I certainly wanted to give it some thought. And for me, there's some preparation that we can do before and during, when we're having anxiety about going into particular situations that we might not have been thrust into in a while, or new situations entirely. There's 3 parts. The first one is to challenge your negative feelings. So there's an article on healthline.com that quotes a Dr. Keith Morgan, and he recommends it's a form of cognitive treatment for managing anxiety. And that's to just ask yourself, does my emotion, does what I'm feeling fit the context? So that means, does this match? Does what I'm feeling seem appropriate for the situation that I'm going into or that I'm thinking about? And chances are no one ever wants you, or I mean, unless you're going into a literal cage full of lions or snakes, you don't need to be stressed out. You don't need to be anxious. People don't want you to feel that way. They want you to feel calm and collected and confident. So just need to challenge those feelings, ask if it's the context. I think the best question for this, that's worked a lot for me personally, is how do I want to be perceived in this situation? Chances are things that come up are going to be confident, positive, intelligent. Those things will start coming to mind. And just sitting with those positive feelings and sort of mentally applying them to your own present moment should start to loosen something up inside you. Again, how do I want to be perceived in this situation? Confident, positive, intelligent, strong, good things. Apply them to yourself mentally. And then the second step. Let's move on to the second step. That was challenging the negative feelings. Second step is to restore your internal balance. So, anxiety causes our thoughts and our emotions, our internal feelings, to race. And a lot of times, our body isn't keeping up. We're stuck in a chair or something. And this mismatch of our emotions and our thoughts and our body, it can throw our internal balance off. And we need to restore our internal balance. And there's 3 ways that I reckon you can do that, or that I know and use. The first one is to increase my outside, my exterior, to match my interior. And hey, this might come up. You might have a tantrum. You might do something like impulsive, but instead, like maybe exercise before a stressful situation. We know that exercise is such a big thing. I don't want to sound like a broken record. The other half of that is when you're going into a social situation, when you're actually there, use big gestures so that people feel engaged with what you're talking about, they connect with it, and you are more likely to feel confident, because those feelings that you get that are kind of stirred up inside you are going to be able to have an extension through your limbs. You're going to feel like, yeah, this is right. My body, my outside is matching my inside. There's motion going on, and I'm exercising those demons. So, exercising the demons, that is. Anyway, the second way to restore your internal balance is to slow your internal thoughts so that it can match where your body is at. I learned a breathing technique called Ujjayi breath recently. Apparently, it's a yogic breathing technique, but it relaxes the gland that is responsible for the cortisol and the other chemical releases in your body when you're stressed out. It gets like that gland like starts squeezing and pumping that stuff into your body, and if you breathe, you're warming air that passes by that little goober, that little sack of skin, and it relaxes when the warm air that's been cooked up a little by your body goes around that gland, and so you feel less stressed out. So just pausing and breathing is a great way to slow down what's going on inside. And then the third way is to focus on just one thought. That's the third way to restore your internal balance. Don't think ahead to what your next thought is, to what you're going to say next, what's going to happen next. We only have the present moment, okay? planning time is important, and that's for your daily check-ins. That's for your calendar, your checklist. But once you have that checklist and your calendar in order, boom, 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 you're thinking about what's going on in the present moment only. So you're going to have anxiety if you get outside of that. You're going to have anxiety if you're constantly, and the worst part is if you're talking to someone, you're going to start fumbling over your words as you get ahead of yourself, and that's when you start to have shallow breathing and you get nervous and you start, your anxiety and your stress create a vicious cycle that are just going to throw your balance off more and more. So those are 3 ways to restore your internal balance. The third way that I can recommend for the third way for preparing for positive re-entry is just to know yourself. The biggest thing that I've learned about authenticity is it comes from knowing what is unique about you. What are the things that only you have experienced? Knowing what those things are and being proud of them, sharing them with people and sharing yourself with people is how you're going to create authentic connection and truly be at ease in any situation when you go back to circumstances that you might not have encountered in the last year during lockdown. So, yeah, remember that we're all struggling to engage with others. You have to remind yourself, I'm not afraid of other people knowing who I am. That's a big thing for me. Got to remember, I'm not afraid having you, in this case, know who I am. I want to be open about that. I mean, I can show you my house. We can do a tour, but knowing myself and being able to share that with people and express that without reservation is going to be more important than ever, and it's going to be more important than ever to remind yourself, because even though I'm telling you this now, I forget these things on a daily basis. I have to write it down. I have to revisit these things. I am writing it down. I'm just making it available, and I want to make it searchable, and I want to make it a lot better. So remind yourself as you come back from the pandemic that remind yourself of the things that make you different. Brag about those things. Brag about them. At least you'll be interesting. At least do it when you're constructing your own internal narrative of what you're proud of. Because knowing who you are is going to enable you to engage in social situations with extreme positivity and self-assuredness, and it's going to feel really good and be really rewarding. So those are the 3 ways that I reckon you can really facilitate your return to what people are calling quote unquote normal life. And I hope you enjoyed those tips. I hope you learned something useful. I'm going to have this up as a blog post in the next day or 2. Yeah, probably Thursday, and it's also going to be featured in the newsletter if you want to read the transcript from this and a little bit, some other tangents that I went off on. So I hope you can join us for next week's stream, and I'll take your questions